All right, everybody, welcome back to BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. Drive Safe Dave here, along with Sir Rick. I want to make sure I remind everybody that Matthew Leffler, a founder of Armchair Attorney, and also Adam Blanchard, co-founder and CEO of Double Diamond Transport, is with us today with the ever-present, ever all-knowing Sir Rick, also rounding out the panel. Drive Safe Dave. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having us on.
All right, so here it is, the hot topic. AB5, we're going to discuss that. We're going to break it down. But before we do, first of all, why is employee and contractor classification so significant? Y'all want to, who wants to line up with that? Go ahead.
Let me explain this. This is about risk management. When you have someone as an independent contractor, there are things that you are not going to have to pay for them. Things like benefits, compensation for overtime, the Social Security withholdings or unemployment insurance or workers' compensation employment. So all of these different things that you spend money on, when you have someone as an independent contractor, you're not paying for those things. When they're an employee, you have to comply with all of the wage, labor, and hour statutes that are for your state. So this is about risk management and cost control. How you differentiate between an independent contractor and an employee is a very important topic for every single organization.
And I think too, it's even more than that. Sorry, Dave, you go ahead. But I mean,
go ahead. Jump in. I can't wait to get y'all going. Let's go.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, Dave, is this is the American dream. Aside from the legal aspects of this AB5 issue that we're dealing with, it's about providing people the opportunity to live the American dream. I mean, you think about a lot of these owner-operators, our fleet is predominantly owner-operator based, and they start as a company driver, have an opportunity to move up to go get their own rig and lease on and, move themselves into an income class that's 2-3 times higher than it is to be a company driver. And so, this whole idea that AB5 is somehow protecting the middle class is quite the opposite. It's inhibiting people's ability to have a better and more prosperous future. And so that's, I think, an issue that I've taken real exception with here, because we love to see these drivers on with us that start with one truck and then they have 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, they're building their own small business with us. And when you have legislation like this that occurs and policy like this, all you're doing is preventing those people from moving up and living the American dream just like we have.
I think we are talking about AB5 and what it means and what it's doing and what it's going to do. But first, before we get there, Sir Rick, why is it important that we separate as an employer to separate the as much as you can your contractors from your independent contractors from your employees?
Yeah, what's amazing right now, Drive Safe Dave, is that's exactly what I was going to ask our armchair attorney out there, because to Adam's point, he doesn't have a lot of mixture, a lot of independent contractors out there. Hey, but to you, Matthew, what about those companies that are dispatching company fleet and independent contractors and dispatch them with the same dispatcher, the same driver manager? What kind of risk, if any, are they taking by running their business like that?
This is all about control. What can you make somebody do? AB5 has a lot of news. It's very interesting in the papers these days, but the reality is this is not a new problem. AB5 is the codification of a case in the California Supreme Court called Dynamex from 2018, but we've been dealing with owner-operators since the 1970s and 1980s, so this is not a new problem. In terms of how you dispatch people, this is a really interesting case we can talk about with Schneider. Schneider had owner-operators, and they said, you can take these routes, you can take these loads, you can reject them, but the one thing you can't do is work for my competitor. You can't do that. And that was what made it the case of the control that a dispatcher or a broker can have over an independent contractor that calls into question, are they actually business owners? Or are they just people that you say are business owners, when the reality is that they're not? They're not business owners because you are making them do everything. You tell them where to go, what to wear, how fast to go, and what route to take. So the reality of how you limit your liability as someone who's brokering to an independent contractor is make sure you have an arm's length transaction, that owner operator has an incorporated business and has all the licensing and titling and registration and authority that they need to do the job you want them to do. And I want to belabor this point, but this is not about taking jobs away from people who want to be business owners. No, not at all. You can absolutely be an independent contractor, and there's a lot of great reasons to do that. However, if you misclassify somebody to avoid all of these liabilities, the court will look at the facts and they will say, I don't care what you hiring entity say this person does. I'm going to look at how you behave with them. And that will then tell you whether they are an employee or they're a contractor. And the misclassification is an incredibly large liability that you can face as a hiring entity.
Adam, let me ask you a question. Does AB5, when we're talking about it, and what he's saying, does it ban owner operators?
Well, I don't think we know yet, Dave. That's the real concern is what is the outcome going to be? I mean, we're in the very early phases of seeing this transition now that the U.S. Supreme Court chose not to overrule AB5 based on the F4A grounds. We appealed that case up to the Supreme Court. So I don't think we know yet, but I can tell you this. I was recently at the ATA's MCE. I've been most recently at the TXTA Board of Directors meeting, and we're sitting around trying to figure out how do you fall within the confines of AB5 and still have an owner-operator-based fleet. And, there's certain, concepts and ideas that people have right now, but I'm finding it harder and harder to believe that we're going to continue to be able to operate fleets, especially those that are mixed between company drivers and owner operators, and still comply with AB5 and the requirements of their employee classification.
That's a great point Adam brings up. That's prong 2 of the ABC test of outside of the hiring entity's normal business. And so if you are a company that has a fleet of owner operators and a fleet that has company drivers, California might look at you and say, I don't believe you. I don't believe these are independents at all. I believe they're actually employees. Now, you can still get around this, and I would always say consult with an attorney. But if these independent contractors have the ability to take on work from other people, and they're able to plan their own routes, and they have their own businesses, nothing will necessarily stop this. Where you see the biggest friction points right now with AB5 is drayage operations, where they say to somebody, you're a contractor, but you're going to do only my routes, and you're going to do from here to there 5 times a day, and I'm going to pay you $500. And if you don't get them done, I don't pay you. And if you do get them done, I pay you. I will pay you. But if you're sitting in traffic, I pay you nothing. What will happen is many of those entities will then ultimately be employees. And if they're employees, all of these things of back wages, benefits, time off, all of these things come knocking at your door. And there's not a single insurance policy you can buy today that will protect you from that liability. Now, just to back up just a little bit further, Dynamex is pretty clear. And the law before Dynamex was back in 1989 is also very clear. Every single driver for FedEx Ground and every Amazon driver are independent contractors. They're separate businesses. So to think that this model goes away because of AB5, I don't think that's true. And I will also note the ABC test is in over 20 states right now. Now, it is a very, very difficult test to pass, but it is something that's out there. There's other tests out there like the economic realities test that a lot of the federal circuits will use. But this is not the end of the world that many people have portrayed it to be. It is just a codification of a common law case in California from 2018.
Let me ask you, and I'm going to ask a real quick question here, and I'm going to just bring this up and just hear me out. Me as an owner-operator, and I was an owner-operator for a long time, it did not have my own authority, leased on to a company, and was able to do this American dream that Adam's talking about. And in fact, a lot of my friends, drivers, and cohorts out there followed the same model, the same thing since the 70s. Getting a truck, buying a truck, going on, leasing onto a company, couldn't afford or handle that other part of the business, right? That being leased on part, and was able to, I guess, better themselves by creating a business and getting more trucks and doing this. My question is, does this cease this with AB5? Does this go away without being without my own authority?
I think that's going to be very difficult, Dave. I mean, look, we're in an untenable position right now because the U.S. Department of Transportation and FMCSA wants a single carrier to be responsible for safety. Our insurance carriers out there want us to have a policy where these drivers are running underneath our authority. And so when you are no longer able to do that, you're essentially going to have to transition yourself into being a brokerage, but that's an entirely different license, entirely different authority according to the FMCSA. And so, the reality is that our drivers, they can refuse loads. We provide so much back office support for these drivers, the ability for our dispatch team and our cumulative ability as a fleet to go get contracted and dedicated freight, all to the benefit of these drivers. They benefit from discounts that we can pass along to them because of our buying power with an accumulative fleet of 75 or so owner operators. And when you're out there on your own with 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 trucks, you just don't have that same power. You can't help control insurance costs. You can't control fuel costs, maintenance costs. You're on your own. And when you have a market like we're having right now, where the spot market is collapsing, at least with dry van freight, these owner operators out there need to be part of larger groups like ours in order to continue to operate their business. And so can the industry adapt and find a way for this to work? Sure we can, but there's enough headwinds right now with the supply chain crisis in the U.S. We've got enough headwinds within our industry. This is just another headache that is completely unnecessary for the future economic growth of the country.
Matthew, let me ask you a real quick question. If we're talking about this, does this AB5, how is this going to affect countrywide? I know in California they're starting it. Obviously, this is going to have ramifications across the country. Where do you see this going?
It's a great question, and I'll begin with the test. So AB5 is a statute, and Prop 22 was when the gig companies came out and lobbied with hundreds of millions of dollars to exempt themselves. So everyone else kind of fell into this category of what AB5 was. AB5 is the ABC test. It is a 3-part test that establishes the relationship between a hiring entity and the thing that's been hired, whether it's an employee or contractor. The default presumption is that you are an employee, and you must prove that you are not an employee. Now, this only really happens when a driver says, I've been misclassified, I'm going to sue. And then you have this litigation that happens. The state of California is not putting a lot more resources into enforcement on the employer side unless there's these private litigants that will go after them. In terms of the nation generally, many states use the ABC test, over 20 of them. So this idea that AB5 is this catalyst that is going to ignite a fire, it's not the case. ABC test has been out in many states far before California adopted it with the case of Dynamex. But I would say, if you're really passionate about this business, we should look at other tests that are out there. So the economic realities test is a really good example. What that test does is it doesn't presume that you're an employee. It presumes that whatever you've been classified is what you actually want. And it looks and says, how much money do you spend to run your business? So if you don't have your own authority, but you're paying a lease on your truck, maybe that helps indicate that you are a separate business. The reality ultimately is, if you want to be an independent company, you can do that, but you're going to have to do a lot of work. In some cases, we've seen some carriers hire on what used to be independent contractors and then also pay that company for using the truck. So it's a 2-payment system. Here's your W-2 income. Here's your payment for your truck you're using for our business. So again, this is going to continue to be a big issue because we look at the gig companies and we see the Ubers and the DoorDash and the Grubhub, and 40% of people who use those platforms as making money are also using food stamps. They're using SNAP. So we pay for all of these people when the hiring entity chooses not to give people benefits. So we have to, as a society, understand what is the thing we're really chasing. Do we want people to have the autonomy to run their own business, or do we want to have people with some level of protection that's not subsidized by the federal government? We will continue to see this trend because so many businesses rely on the independent contractor model, and it helps reduce costs for some people. So it'll be fun and interesting to see the next 3 to 5 years as this stuff continues to percolate across the country.
So I have a question so one of the companies you're speaking of was Universal Logistics in California that created the company employees out of the independent contractors. Adam, question for you on that. As a trucking company, as the owner of a trucking company, is that a genius move? Is that the smart move? Did you feel betrayed? What were your thoughts when Universal went out and did that and created all of those, the independent contractors became employees? Was it business as normal? Did you have any feeling one way or the other about that?
Look, the easiest way to get around any concern you have with AB5 is to our fleet, for instance. We're 95% owner operator fleet. Easy way to handle that's make everybody W-2 employees. I think those that don't own and operate trucking companies like ourselves, Rick, they don't understand that there is a reason that these drivers are owner operators. There's a reason that they have their own trucks. There's a reason that they started their own businesses. And so to turn around and go to them and say, look, guys, congratulations on what you've done up to this point, but now you guys are going to have to be, or men and women are going to have to be W-2 employees. I think what we're going to see is a lot of people leave our fleet. And I think we're going to have a lot of people leave the industry and say, look, if I've got to be an employee, I'm going to go be an employee in some other industry outside of trucking. I mean, this business is hard enough. This industry is hard enough, especially for their drivers and everything they do. I think there's a more practical fallout from having to force them to be W-2, even aside from, the legal and I guess more theoretical aspect of it.
Yeah, and Matthew. So also as an owner of a trucking company, I had feelings about that as well. Is again, Dave, to what you said earlier, is that these independent contractors, I do believe that they're going out there to live a dream. They're going out there to create this business. And for states or for the AB5, for example, I just myself as an owner of a trucking company don't believe that this really does a benefit to anybody. I don't believe, number one, that AB5 was really ever set up for trucking companies. It wasn't meant for the independent contractors. I think it was meant more for what you were talking about before, the Uber, the Lyft drivers, all of those gig workers, these independent contractors, especially. And Adam, I'm gonna piggyback what you said, especially in times that we're in right now when fuel's at an all-time high and they're not getting those fuel discounts, when rates are, especially on that spot market, are at all-time lows or moving towards that direction. I shouldn't say all-time lows, moving definitely lower. Boy, it'd be nice to have a contracted rate from a larger trucking company that has those things. I just don't feel like this is the answer, nor this is the direction that we in our industry want to go, need to go, have to go. However, Matthew, it is what it is, right? I mean, the rules may be out there. Now we have to learn how to play within that sandbox.
Yeah, and I'd like to just to push back a little bit, right? So in our industry, if you were to look at the Brake Safety Week data, we had over 20% of commercial vehicles fail the maintenance that they're required to have to operate safely on the highways. And so when you have this idea of outsourcing to an independent contractor, you're outsourcing a level of risk. The maintenance, the repair, the insurance in some cases, all of this, that's your problem to solve. And if you are a business owner and you want to minimize risk, the independent contractor model is persuasive. It does offer a lot of really great incentives, and it does give people the ability to earn as much as they really want. But you put that compliance onto the owner operator. What AB5 and the cases before that, the dynamics before, looked at the facts of people saying, hey, I really want to avoid this liability. This risk needs to go away. How can I do that? And they make this innovation of independent contractors. But then when a judge looks at it, I mean, imagine if Walmart took a cashier and said, that's actually a contractor. It's not an employee. Now they wear the Walmart uniform. They have to show up at a certain time. They have to do the job a certain way. And that's what this stuff is all about, is the actual functional relationships between the hiring entity and the people that work under them, either they're employees or they're independent contractors. And so we are living in this world right now. And so that two-payment system, I'll just kind of just take a moment and talk about the liability risk of misclassification. You have to pay the attorney's fees for someone who goes after you and wins on these cases. You pay back wages, back unemployment, back workers' comp, back health insurance. And this is stuff that your general liability policy will not protect you. You will pay out of pocket for every one of these things. And so when companies are trying to understand, how do I navigate this? What happens if I make a wrong decision? You go bankrupt. That's what happens. That's what happens to you. And so we are living in a world where now people are looking and saying, what is the independent contractor model really about? And I like to go back to the 1980s before deregulation. The average compensation for an over-the-road trucker was 38 grand. 60% of them were unionized. Fast forward to today, and that number adjusts for inflation of $120,000. And most truckers aren't making 120K. So this is the reality, is we have taken the profits from some of our drivers and lowered the cost for consumer goods at the backs of truck drivers, 10% of whom are veterans. So whatever can give drivers better parking opportunities, safer pieces of equipment, and safer roads, I'm for that. And if our maintenance today is 20% fail inspection, we have to make dramatic changes. And so I will follow this stuff along. And it's not the end of the world for most companies. Many businesses have been wrestling with owner-operators for decades and decades and decades.
So my turn. Hold on, David. My turn. Adam, I know you're ready to jump in, but I don't believe it's the independent contractors that we speak of that are leased on to most trucking companies. I don't believe the trucking companies actually look at it like you're saying. We grade them. We make sure that they have that because they're running under our authority. We're going to put them through the same tests that our vehicles are on. Most of the time, a lot of companies, they're pulling our trailers as well to make sure that we maintain a good, safe trailer equipment. We're going to make them go and get, the same inspections that we expect on our tractors. I don't believe, and maybe that's just our company, or maybe that's just Adam, what we do here in Texas, but I don't believe we look at it as an independent contractor as a means to reduce the liability. As a matter of fact, I think you got to be even more strict to make sure their equipment is taken care of. Adam, what do you think about that?
Look, I think that it's real easy for these trial lawyers, because that's ultimately who's going to be the benefactor of this. The government may audit some of these companies out there under AB5, but the bottom line is, with AB5, we are going to perpetuate an even greater lawsuit abuse environment. You're going to have this wage and hour plaintiffs bar that's going to go throughout the country now and start suing these trucking companies. And I fundamentally disagree with the fact that having owner operators in your fleet makes you less safe, exposes you to more risk. I think, in fact, taking smaller operators and folding them under the umbrella of larger fleets like our fleet, your fleet, Rick, affords them the ability to be safer on the road. I mean, we do quarterly inspections. We inspect their trucks thoroughly before they come on. They get the benefit of utilize Love Tire Pass, so they can have their trucks and our trailers inspected when they're fueling up. I mean, I just think that this narrative that it's all based on a safer motoring public is just fundamentally untrue. And I'll speak to Matthew's point a minute ago about misclassifying a cashier at Walmart. Well, they're not bringing in the cash register with them. I mean, that's just I think that analogy is misplaced. The bottom line is these guys men and women that come on with us, many of which are veterans, are affording themselves a higher wage and a higher income under this model. And by leasing on with fleets like us, they're getting the benefit of having that support staff, those contracted rates, the avoidance of risk, and that American dream that they're going to lose if this system ends in the United States.
Let me ask a real quick question before we. Obviously, this is a state law. This is a law that's being moved forward, and truly, if we want to change any of this, we have to change with laws. We have to change the law. If anything, what we're talking about with AB5. And let me ask you real quick, Adam. I know you're a board member of Texas Trucking Association. What is some measures that they may be looking at to preemptively to stop that kind of legislation from happening here?
Well, look, the Texas Trucking Association is doing what I think all state trucking associations should be doing, which is, how do we prevent this from happening in the states in which we are based, the states in which we operate, to prevent the fallout like we're seeing in California? I mean, the ultimate outcome here would be to get some legislation passed at the federal level that would prevent AB5 from being applied to our industry. But given the current presidential administration and dynamic up in Washington, I don't think there's any chance of that in the near term. And so with the Supreme Court not preempting AB5 on the F4A grounds, which is a federal law, what we're going to have to start doing is taking up this fight state by state. I mean, just like you're seeing California, Washington, New Jersey, all of these more liberal states are now trying to enact this AB5 legislation. we as good conservative states need to start preemptively advocating for legislation that's going to ensure that we don't have that test. We need the economic reality test, some type of a multi-factor test that is going to prevent that from happening in our states, so that we have some reassurance that we can continue to move America forward, support small businesses in our respective states, and give these incredible independent contractors out there on the road the opportunity to still have the opportunities that they deserve.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I want to thank both of you. Hey, let me tell you, Adam, Matthew, point, counterpoint, I don't want to be in the middle of you two. If ever there was a chance to an argument, I want to stay out of the middle and just watch you go. But I'll tell you what, you both bring up great points, especially understanding what we can do, what we should do, and where we're at. And I think this is a discussion that we're going to have to continue to have. And as AB5 plays out in California, right, and what's going on, we're going to get a bigger picture of how it actually handles and how it actually comes down, right? We really haven't seen it in the courts yet with trucking companies just yet, but I assume it'll get there someday, right? I mean, y'all both know that some attorney will find a way to drag it into a courtroom at some point, and we'll figure out where we're at on that. I want to thank both of y'all coming in. Sir Rick, what do you got?
I appreciate it. Hey, as well, it's nice to have. It's nice to be surrounded with people smarter than me. I don't get that opportunity when it's just Dave and I. So I am really honored to have both y'all in here and appreciate it. I love these discussions because, we're hearing different sides. And Matthew, I appreciate your perspective on that. Adam, you as well. It's nice to hear these things. And at the end of the day, it is what it is, right? These are facts, and we can have our opinions. And me, it's a lot of feelings. It's, that go inside of this. But for y'all, both of you, both attorneys, y'all know what's going on. Sir Rick's just out there trying to live with it and make it happen. Thank you both for being on BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. Appreciate it. Love to have it. I think this needs to keep going on. We need to get some boxing gloves on too.
No,
right?
I tell you what, the hard questions, the hard topics, and the discussions that are going to have to be made are got to be made by guys like you, and every single time, because we need to hear what's out there and to better understand what's going on, because I truly think there should be other tests out there besides AB5. I like what you brought up, Matthew, and Adam even agrees. I think there needs to be ways to look at this in different ways, but we're going to do it. We're going to do it together. I thank you both here on Veterans Day. Happy Veterans Day to every one of you, and we'll be back in just a second with some safety on BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
It's on.